Hey guys, Jonny Quirk back once again here to support your entrepreneurial journey. Okay, cool. So today I'm delighted on the Go Solo show that we have Martin SFP Bryant from Big Revolution. Martin, welcome to the show.
Hello, Johnny.
Great to have you here. And basically, can I just maybe ask in your own words, how would you describe your business and what is it that you do?
So, Big Revolution is basically an agency, I suppose, would be one way of putting it, a consultancy
Yeah,
for working with tech companies, and helping them with their communication. So that can be PR, but it can also very much be branding. It can be making sure, essentially, that they're telling the right story about what they do. Because a lot of the companies I work with, they have great tech, but when it comes to actually describing it and framing it in terms of putting it to market in an interesting way, sometimes they just need a little bit of help with that, and often you can get to that simply by
yeah.
talking to them. And once you've talked to them and you understand where they're coming from, putting it into words is a lot easier. It's also a vehicle for all the other things I do as well. So I've got a YouTube channel
Yeah.
and a newsletter and all the things that, as a former journalist, the itch I have to scratch.
Yeah, you're a busy guy. I see obviously you do an awful lot. Obviously we've been friends for many years and it's great obviously to see that you kind of almost like have this spider of like little kind of things flying off in terms of what you obviously do on a daily basis. Are your kind of customers at the moment? I'm interested to know about the business model. So I don't need to pry into too many private secrets here, Martin. So don't worry. But do you have like more customers on retainer, or basically do you kind of do one-offs, or is it a bit of a hybrid of both? How is your business model? How does that work?
It's a hybrid of both. I don't try to cajole companies into going on retainer if they don't need it. I
Yeah,
think, especially if you look at the PR side of things, I think a lot of tech companies are pushed into long running, especially if they're startups, are pushed into these long running retainer agreements
yeah.
where they might have, oh, we'll work with you for 6 months and we need that time to make sure we build up your profile. But the fact is that a lot of the time, if you're a B2B tech startup, when are the press going to be interested?
Yeah.
Generally, when you've got something to announce, which is around a funding announcement or whatever. So I tend to work more in short bursts with companies. There are companies I work with on a more long-term basis,
Yeah.
if that's what they need. But really, it's down to what they need rather than what I need, which you could say isn't the best way to grow a business. But I'd rather grow a business the right way for my clients than the right way for me.
Yeah, and I think that's very, very sensible. I mean, we're all running our own race and doing it how we want. And like you said, in terms of building a reputation and the likes, you can have a great relationship with long-term clients, but also be there when they need you, I guess. So plus if build up that
Mm.
reputation of announcing a Series B, whatever, then they know that you're a trusted pair of hands for it. So you mentioned obviously before that you're a journalist, obviously in a previous life, if you will do. When became the decision to set up your own business? Have you always kind of had an entrepreneurial side inside of you? I know you've been into tech and startups really since the kind of dawn of that, but what kind of almost kind of made you say, right, I'm going to go it alone. I'm going to create my own business. Is it in the family? Is it something you want to do yourself? Has it been a gradual thing? Tell me all about it.
No, not at all. It's certainly not a family thing.
Yeah.
My mum was a teacher, my dad was a bus driver,
Right.
and great people. At all, just not entrepreneurial.
Yeah. Yeah.
They didn't have their own businesses or anything like that. And I never thought entrepreneurship was for me at all. At school it was the thing that Richard Branson did, and if you were a certain kind of person, maybe you could be an entrepreneur, but it was
Yeah.
never something that was dived into in much detail at school, and so it's not something I ever really thought about. And as I got older, I saw people start businesses, and I thought I can never do that because I don't know how to do that,
Mm.
and I don't have the right idea. But as I went to got a bit older, went through life a little bit more, carried on working in various jobs, started a career as a tech journalist, and kind of built my way up through that. I realized that what I was doing constantly while I was working for a company was asking for permission to do extra things. So I was always saying, oh, could I, is it okay if I leave a bit early to go on TV to do this? Or I'm doing this big project, which involves setting up an event.
Yeah.
Can I go and do that? And it's tangentially related to what we do as a business. So it's kind of okay. And I realized that actually I'm much better and more comfortable doing my own thing and leading my own path than I
Yeah.
am as an employee generally. And that's not to say I'll never be an employee ever again, but
Yeah.
it would have to be the right role at the right company. And at the moment, I feel a lot happier doing my own thing. So at some point, it was just like I burst, and it was time. I
Yeah.
had to do it. So I thought, right, now or never. Let's do it. Let's start a business.
I think that's interesting. I mean, the way you said it, like here at Go Solo, I'm using Subkit, we talk a lot about side hustles, side gigs, and sometimes, nature finds its way. I don't know if that's some kind of quasi quote from Jurassic Park or something that I've stolen there, but, as you said, if it was something that you were moving into anyway, in terms of spending your days thinking, oh, I can do a bit here, I can do a bit there, I guess, you've built that audience and that reputation, then you kind of do it. This isn't on my list of questions to ask you, but it makes sense to ask you now. Was there ever a point when you said, I want to be the next, and again, I use this in the best possible way, the next Zuckerberg or the next Musk or, because you've been covering tech for so long in startups, have you ever said, do you know what? I want to be a CEO or a CMO or something of a fast moving startup, or has journalism been your passion? So this is the perfect business for you?
Well, I've probably thought, there are times where I've thought, oh, I'd like to do my own startup, but if I did, I would have to have the right idea.
Yeah.
And I've never had that one idea that I thought, this is the problem I want to solve. This is the problem I want to make, better for the world. And because I've not had that, I'm not the kind of person who's going to go and say, right, I'm going to do 6 months of scouting around looking for business problems to solve. I'm not an MBA type person. So that just wouldn't interest me. But if the right problem came along that I could solve through a tech company, then I may well do it. But no, not as of yet.
You heard it here first. It's like, keep those ideas to yourself, otherwise Martin might be writing them down. But no, it's true. I think, like you said, we're all hoping to, like crack a big problem one day and, look at potentially something. But I think, like you said, unless that kind of right idea really falls in and your fire's in your belly to do that, then it's great. And I guess you're in a perfect situation because you're doing something that you love every day. It's obviously a great business, but also, you're exposed to startups and that kind of way of thinking. I guess you can, tell what trends are coming out as well and kind of what the market needs. So we're going to cover that a little bit later as well. So we're big fans of planners here. We're big planners here at Subkit, like we all are, working about how we best spend our days. And I'm very interested in terms of how you manage your days, because you do an awful lot. I mean, you started off this call basically saying that like you're doing all sorts of things, your YouTube channels, you're very, very active on Twitter, etc. How do you plan your days? What's your kind of method to make sure that you start Monday in the right possible way, and by Friday you go, wow, I feel very happy with what I've got done?
So I organize myself really simply. I think people can overthink productivity and have loads of different tools. And for me, I like simplicity. So I have a Trello board that I have my long-term projects on. And so, if I've got a client that I'm talking to, they might start on the left-hand side. And as we move towards, yes, we're serious about it. And then it's definitely booked in. It's going to happen soon. This is something I need to work on now. And it's done. Fantastic. And it moves across like that. But then for just day to day, making sure I get the little bits and of all these different projects done and everything else I need to do done, it's a simple text document. It's a Google Keep document. So it's just, I've got a list Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and on it through the week, I'll just say if on Monday I realize, on Thursday I've got to do that, I'll just write a sentence about it. But then when it gets to the day before, for the next day, I write 9 a.m. write newsletter, 10:45 email, 11 o'clock call with Jonny. 12 o'clock, well, that, and I'll break it down really specifically. And then I can, and usually I kind of get it roughly right, how long I need for each thing. But that helps make sure that I get through the day and I've done everything in order. But the people who have massively complicated systems and timing systems where, an alarm stops them working every 25 minutes so they can go and do a different task and things. That's overthinking it in my book. But
I've tried
each to their own.
Yeah, I've tried that before myself. I mean, I'm a bit like yourself. I know what I need to work out. I try and think in a kind of macro way as well of like where we're heading in 12, 18, 24 months. But ultimately it comes from, working out what you've done that day and then potentially moving some stuff over, maybe starting with 4 or 5 things you want to get done. One is always going to slip. I'm quite happy to say there's always one thing on my list that doesn't quite make the cut. That's when it's kind of Friday afternoon to get it all done. But, I feel kind of like it, I get there at the end of the day. And I'm interested to know as well, seeing it's obviously a very topical question right now, how did COVID affect your business? I mean, what were those kind of early emotions that you had in terms of COVID? Has there been much impact on your business?
At first, I was worried. Obviously, I think everyone was worried, weren't they? Like, what will happen to our business? And there's total uncertainty because we've never been through this before, where suddenly, in March, suddenly everything stopped, and in March for a little while, basically everything stopped. It did stop. People stopped doing what they were doing because they were like, we don't know what we're doing now. We have to put things on hold. Very little work continued. I was lucky that although some things did get cancelled, some people wanted to carry on with what they were doing around that time. And then as we got into April and May and people started to realize, oh, actually, tech companies at least certainly can continue doing a lot of what they do. Yeah. And in many cases, there's more demand for what they're doing than before. For tech companies and for people like me who work with tech companies, it meant that there hasn't actually been that much of a difference. And I've been kept very, very busy through the year. So although there are definitely opportunities that have either been delayed indefinitely or put on ice, at the same time, lots of new things have come through anyway. So I'm lucky so far that the pandemic hasn't affected me in any serious way.
I can see that. I mean, with working with a lot of startups in the past myself, it was very interesting to see some business models, unfortunately, weren't COVID proof, but actually some really were. And some actually, the opportunity kicked in. We hate to use the word opportunity amongst all this, in a global pandemic, but that's what's going to happen. And I guess some businesses are now coming out of, in a really great way. Hopin, for example, has just had runaway success, Shopify, these kind of businesses, which are perfect for COVID. But then also, I guess you think, look at Airbnb. I mean, not even just talking about the market value when they listed on the stock market last week, or obviously recently, but basically in terms of, they've reinvented their model. They've kind of, almost, they've got to do quite well about it with domestic bookings and the likes as well. So it's very, very interesting, I think, in terms of that. So I guess you have got so much to cover because you're actually playing your part right in the middle of history right now. Cool. So I'm interested. You've worked, Martin, with a lot of big tech companies. You've been to a lot of conferences. You've had a lot of support with these guys. Where do these opportunities come from? When we interview entrepreneurs on here, some amazing opportunities land on their lap. Whereas for other people, they're really out there pushing it and basically trying to do an awful lot of business development. Where do you get these big opportunities from, and how do you really get into these gatekeepers? We're interested to know kind of like how you've managed to get such big names as business partners in the past.
I think for some people it's a very active thing, isn't it? You're actively going out there and kind of networking and doing that kind of thing. For me, I've always let things happen to me, which isn't the best way of doing it at all. Yeah. And yes, I do chase some things. If an opportunity arises and I hear about an opportunity, I will chase it. Yeah. But generally, just through doing good work and being known and talking to people, just generally out of interest, talking to people rather than saying, I'm, here's a business, you come and work with me. I don't like doing that and the whole spamming people on LinkedIn thing and all that kind of thing. I get so many people on LinkedIn who send me a connection request and they're like, I work with businesses like you to accelerate your growth. I was like, well, you're about the fifth person this week who's added me who says they do this, and there's no differentiation there, and you're just this faceless person. Not literally faceless, but there's nothing. I don't know anything about you, so I prefer the gradual building up of the business through having a name and people, reputation and people knowing who you are, and growing connections, being referred, word of mouth growth. I prefer that, and that's partly, I'll be honest, that is partly down to just the amount of capacity I have to do things. So if I'm busy working with the clients, it's very hard to then have time to tee up the next clients. And sometimes that means you get to a point where you've just finished a big project, and so it's like, I've got nothing for the next 2 weeks. What am I going to do? And partly that's how, for example, the YouTube channel started, because I did have a quiet patch for a week or two. And it's like, well, what am I going to do? Well, I've always wanted to do a YouTube channel. Let's do it. And so I keep busy. But also at that point, that's when I start, reaching out a bit more to clients. But I think generally it's about word of mouth and natural growth.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And also I like what you just said about your YouTube video and YouTube channel, the fact that you've got to almost like sow these seeds and see what they will grow into. So if you have that fallow period.
Well, Yeah, absolutely. And also that directly led to a couple of bits of work coming in my way from people who saw videos and went, oh, hang on a second, this guy could do what we need. So, just doing it was partly to scratch an itch, but partly a way of growing the name of the Big Revolution name and the name of what I was doing. And it's worked. Although the downside of it is then you become too busy to do a daily or weekly or whatever video. I never plan to do daily. That's far too much. That's pro YouTuber stuff. And if you want to make it your income stream for life and be a professional YouTuber that's all you do, then doing video every day, the algorithm pushes you towards doing that. I wanted to do one a week at first, but at the moment it's more like one a month. But I'm sure the pace will pick up again.
It's a big commitment, isn't it, to doing that? But I think it's interesting, especially what you actually just mentioned about LinkedIn as well, because, I think LinkedIn is almost, LinkedIn, a great resource, obviously for business, brilliant. There's many ways you can use it, but it has probably over the last 3 or 4 months, I think, even last 6 months, got even more spammy than usual. It seems like it's almost like it's too much hard work to almost go on it now, because the amount of requests and spams and would you like to sign up to this page and whatever, it's just, you get there and it's not really a pleasant experience, where it used to be a case of like, oh, I'm looking forward to seeing who's in this business or opportunities or events near me. So I'm obviously not saying LinkedIn is dying. If anything, it's kind of roaring on all cylinders, really. You're firing on all cylinders. But I think it's interesting to know kind of what comes next, really, after that, where people can start to make more business connections that are more genuine, really, until that becomes a supernova or something that starts to burn out as well from overuse. What's your thoughts there? Are there any other platforms coming out where you would say...
Well, every year or two, something will come along that people say, oh, this is the new LinkedIn. And they tend to have a very viral approach to getting people to sign up, but then nothing happens with them. And I had another one the other week. I forget the name of it now, but I discounted it because I was like, it's just going to be another one of these ones where you sign up and then nothing ever happens with it. And everyone stays on LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn's problem is partly its own. It's pushing to grow, always pushing to grow, and so they try new things and new kinds of notifications and things, and that's what any social network does. It's partly, I think, down to the fact that because of the kind of year we've had in 2020 with the whole people being laid off and people trying to forge their own path. You have a lot of people trying to forge their own path on LinkedIn and trying to develop their name, and part of that is reaching out to new people saying, hey, I'm a consultant, I'm available. But I think people forget how spammy that is, and it's not necessarily it's an easy way to try and grow your network, but it's not necessarily the most effective way.
Yeah, you're right. There's an awful lot of noise out there. I'm sure maybe on a daily basis I get, a few, maybe see one that would be a really great quality contact. But when you're having to wade through 4, 5, 6 or whatever, which are just trying to tell you something, you just go, and then like, when can I get off, sort of thing. But like you said, well, I think it's kind of interesting, the opportunity to network in real life and build up those genuine relationships as well have disappeared this last year as well. So it's very interesting. It'll be interesting to see where LinkedIn takes it, because, obviously we all want to develop those strong partnerships which are useful for everybody. We all want to add value to each other's lives. And I think you want to build up the valuable ones where both of you win for the connection, both of you win for the partnership. It shouldn't just be like, can you do this for me?
Yeah.
You will get this sort of thing. So we're moving through to the part of the show now, Martin, where we ask our entrepreneurs who come on the show for some of their top tips for other entrepreneurs about how to grow their business as well. So as you know, we're all about empowering entrepreneurs to, do things which are really going to help them and build a sustainable, organically growing business. So one thing we always ask is, I think it's kind of quite, common knowledge really. Probably the best thing to do really to start off with is to grow an audience to start off with. No audience, no real kind of way of selling anything. And selling things, like obviously you can spend loads of money on Facebook ads, social ads, whatever, but ultimately that's probably not what you want to do. You want to build up probably a very genuine audience to start off with, really, of advocates and potential leads and customers. So I'm just interested, what kind of tips you would give maybe for people who are maybe starting out from scratch. How in today's modern online world would they build an audience? You've got, loads of Twitter followers. You've got like 25,000, but I know that's been carefully curated through the years. But, if someone was starting out right now, how would you suggest they build an audience?
Yeah, well, it's really down to consistency and a passion and focus for what you share and what you talk about. And I'm not the best example of this at all. Most of my growth on Twitter, for example, came when I was a tech journalist and I was every day publishing tech news. I was talking about tech news. I was every day I was very fast to say, oh, Google's just acquired this company or whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever the tech news was, I was one of the people who's talking about it first. And so people followed me for that. And I've still got that network on there, and people still follow me on Twitter, but it's definitely slowed down. And I think part of that is the fact that I'm not that consistent. So I'm not a great example of this. So I will literally use Twitter for whatever I'm interested in. So yes, it is. A lot of it is tech or tangentially tech related, but I will talk about what's happening in Manchester where I live, if I think, there's a broader point to be made with it, or what I'm watching on television or whatever. And so that's not the best way to do it. I think a great example of someone who's doing it really well is somebody I do a lot of work with, a guy called Matt Navarra. And so he is a social media consultant, and I do a podcast with him called Geek Out with Matt Navarra, where we interview social media executives from a lot of the big companies and other figures in the social media world. We've kind of put that on ice in recent months, but we do hope to come back to it soon. The other thing we do is a newsletter, Geek Out newsletter, which is under Matt's name, but I'm the editor. So I work with him on that every week. And so what I find is good about his approach and how he builds an audience is he is consistently on social media, whether it's Twitter, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's Facebook, he is posting every day all sorts of social media news, whether it is, Facebook has been hit with an antitrust suit, or whether it's LinkedIn is trying a tiny little new test that is going to be very slightly different for a few people who are using the service, or, it's here's a top tip or trick for using for social media. And he posts loads of these every day because it's just something he's interested in, he's obsessed with, and, he's fascinated by it, and it's his passion. Yeah. So he does that, and people in the social media industry come to him for that information, and then the media come to him because he's a big name in social media because he knows all this stuff about it. Let's get him on Sky News or whatever to talk about the latest story. And so he's really built that up, and he's built up a business offering social media advice to tech companies and to media companies, etc. Just through having this very strong online brand and experience of working with companies in the past. But that consistency was a key. And part of the reason he can be so consistent is because he actually really likes it. He actually is very into it. And so the other thing is being really passionate about it. So if you're trying to build up a name in something you think you should probably do because there's probably some money in it, but you're not actually interested in it, then you're going to find it harder because your lack of passion will really show if you're just sharing a few links every now and then to some news stories. But you're not actually showing any expertise or real interest in it, then that shows. And so linking up that consistency with the passion is key, I think.
Yeah, I think they're all really great tips. And yeah, I do, follow Matt as well. And you're right, there's some really interesting stuff that obviously comes out from him. But also I listen to the podcast. I do hope it comes back as well, Martin. My cleaning chores or whatever I do,
Yeah.
I haven't been the same since. But I mean, bottom line is, you're right, being genuine, I think, is so important, because actually, like you said, having a love for it, consistency, I think you're right, both of you are very, very visible online. But I think probably being that authority as well, maybe, I think, is a point you were just making, is that your thing? Like you said, you could be talking about tech 1 minute, but then talking about something that's very, very local, and maybe some of your followers aren't that interested in it. I'm the same, I'll talk about what I'm on TV,
yeah.
and then I might be posting something else to do with tech. But you're right. I think having that authority piece, I guess, kind of brings you in that audience, because they know in a world of noise that maybe they only want to listen to 4 or 5 people who they can genuinely kind of trust as well. This kind of follows on to my next question, which we always ask as well. So your content and social presence is vibrant. It's like you're doing all sorts of things. We touched on the YouTube channel and the likes of that. But I'm interested on your social presence as well, because you're kind of always on. And that's difficult, I find, in terms of for myself, because again, I'm a planner, so I'm kind of having my day, and then I'm like, oh no, I've got to get out some tweets or whatever, or I haven't even been on Twitter all day. What's your kind of way for doing that? You mentioned before you had a strong capacity for doing work and actually doing the likes, but how are you always on? Like, what's your technique for actually making sure your brain can be in numerous places at the same time? Please tell me something that I can use as well, because I need this.
I wouldn't recommend. Yeah, well, first of all, I wouldn't recommend being always on. I was more always on than I am now when I was a journalist, and I would literally, constantly be looking for tech news constantly, like every day, 7 days a week. I would be constantly checking to make sure that the next web where I worked, that we were covering everything we should be covering. And, I would constantly have Twitter lists and all sorts of things that I check constantly to make sure that we never missed a thing. And it was draining, and I needed to stop after a while. But some of that never goes. Basically, one thing I have in my browser, I have a pinned tab. So, in browsers, you can pin tabs. So they're always there. And one of the tabs I pin is TweetDeck. So this is a Twitter app made by Twitter. And it's a different view of Twitter, where it's got columns. So you can have a column for your main feed of all of the people that you follow. You can have your mentions, your DMs and things, but you can also have searches and all kinds of different feeds coming into it. Other people's feeds, that kind of thing. You can see lots of information very quickly. And so basically, as I'm working, I can't help it. It's not like a deliberate strategy. I just click over to TweetDeck, see what's happening. I can very quickly check the tech news, because I've got a tech news column. I can quickly check the political news as well. I've got a column for that, and then I can quickly comment on that, or reply to somebody. So I do that through the working day, and then in the evenings I just look at my phone too much. There's nothing more. There's no secret other than I look at my phone a lot, and the Twitter app is a place that my thumb tends to default to on the screen. So the more you look at a social network that you're interested in, the more you're likely to engage with it. So there's no real tip. If you're the kind of person who has to make time for it, then you're maybe just not that into it, and that's fine. One way you can, if you don't have a lot of time, but you want to share things through the day, use something like Buffer. Or Twitter on the web has scheduling built into it these days. So you can actually tweet something, but set it up so that it's scheduled to tweet 3 hours later. And then through the day, you can be getting on with whatever you're doing, knowing that tweets are going out. That obviously means you're not engaging with anyone who might reply to those tweets, but it at least gets your face on there through the day. I'm a little wary about doing that, because I always think, like, what if I tweet this, but then there's some big world news event and suddenly I look really crass for tweeting, here's a funny thing I saw on the internet earlier, when everyone's talking about some awful terrorist attack or something. Yeah,
that's a tricky thing as well, I guess, being a tech journalist yourself, or at least in that realm right now, it's, you know, that you can't miss a big story as well. Like, you know, who knows what that kind of big story is? I remember trying to think who it was. It was like over the Thanksgiving. Was it maybe the Slack purchase by Salesforce, I think? And I remember listening to Equity TechCrunch podcast, and they were saying, like, you know, literally the word out on the street happened just before the Thanksgiving holiday, and all journalists were going into meltdown. Give us some information, you know, like, you've got to tell us some news because we're all supposed to be going to visit family and stuff. So I guess you want to be the one who breaks it, or at least, you know, you can't be tweeting about it 3 or 4 days later going, oh, look, I read about this in the newspaper or something. Cool.
Yeah. Well, if it's something I missed, then I tend to just not tweet about it. You know, if it's something that happened yesterday, I won't tweet saying, "Oh, have you heard so and so happened?" I'll just not mention it, or I'll have a take on it or something. You know, a spin on it. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess you can give that kind of deeper analysis. You don't want to be the guy who's at the last guys to the party or something like that, and the party's already happened. So it's very important. So.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've mentioned in terms of you've recently set up a YouTube channel. Congratulations. So have we, which is great. You know, I think we're both learning and stuff. And, you know, I know obviously you've been doing video and podcasting for a long time, but have you got any tips in terms of people who would be looking to record video? You know, a lot of entrepreneurs that we work with, you know, they're starting to record their own video on demand series, you know, their own kind of, you know, video one-to-ones. Just interested in knowing kind of like any tips that you maybe would give for, you know, being able to kind of run great video.
Do you mean in terms of actually recording the video, or in terms of, what do you mean?
Yeah, I mean, basically just in terms of being natural, because I think, you know, when you do your videos, I remember you saying, you know, obviously they take quite a long time to do. I mean, I think when people see video online, they might think, oh, it's a one take or something or whatever. And sometimes it is, but, you know, sometimes it requires, like, you know, lots of editing as well. You know, what's your maybe some tips in terms of how you would maybe approach doing that for the first time, just to get more natural maybe in front of the camera? You know, like, are you using any tips for, you know, like auto cues, or are you using anything which, you know, like, are you recording in 60-second bursts? Just interested maybe for a few tips in terms of if somebody needed to start recording a video session in front of the camera, you know, how would they do it?
Well, if you can get an auto cue set up, it can be really, really useful. I shouldn't really call it an auto cue. That's a brand name. There are other auto cue.
We don't even have
available.
But well, so although you never know,
you need to get sponsored by. Yeah, get sponsored by auto cue. But yeah. But if you can get one of those, they can be quite useful if you can read it, because the way it works is the text goes in front of the camera lens, so that you look like you're looking straight into the camera, but you're also reading. If you can do that at the right, get the text to scroll at the right speed, so that it doesn't look like you're reading it and your eyes are darting backwards and forwards, and you can do it naturally, which just takes practice really, and self-critically looking at footage you've recorded of yourself doing it. I think generally the way I do it when I'm recording my YouTube videos is I have an iPad on my lap which has my notes, and some of it is actual script and some of it is just cover these 4 bullet points. But generally, having an actual script is a lot better, because that means you're actually going to be very clear in what you say, and you're going to be very comprehensive in the way you present it, and you'll have a logical A, B, C, start, middle, end kind of approach, rather than if you're just talking, then you might waffle, and it can be a bit harder. And certainly, as soon as I go a bit off script, I find myself waffling a bit too much, and so I try to avoid doing that. But obviously you can't look down. I can't look down and read a script on my lap. So it's a case of, I tend to record if I can, I'll one take it, but it's very rare that you can do like 5 minutes in one take, because you've got so much to remember. So one trick is to just record as much as you can, talking naturally, remembering as much as you can of what you were going to say. It doesn't matter if you don't say it in exactly the way it's written in the script, but as long as you're covering that ground and you're kind of relying on the script to help keep the structure right and that it all makes sense and flows. Just being relaxed in front of the camera can be a huge thing. So just taking the time to record a few times just so that you're then, when you start going in front of a camera, you're not scared of the fact that you're looking into a lens and not looking at a person. I personally don't even think about, I mean, some people like to think, oh, I'm talking to another person at the other end of the lens. I personally don't. I go into talking to a camera mode. I don't know. But so I think less about the audience as I'm talking. So I don't know. Each to their own, whatever makes you comfortable.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like really, really smart. I mean, I basically read something before we started our YouTube channel that, I don't know where I read it, but it's kind of like, the first 20 videos you should probably be, embarrassed about or whatever like that. Or, obviously there's that old tech thing,
Yeah.
like, whatever your first version of your business, when you put it out there, your website you should be embarrassed about it down the line. I think it's kind of similar to this. You're trying to figure it out. I'm a big firm believer in that Japanese saying Kaizen, that kind of continuous improvement. So if you could make one small tweak to each time you do it, hopefully it's getting better. You're kind of learning something every week. I guess maybe it's a case of not putting too many expectations on yourself. Would you say that?
Yeah, definitely. And 99% of the time, people are less critical of you than you are of yourself. And as long as the content is good in terms of what you're talking about, most people will forgive most problems. As long as you've got you're set some minimum bars for being able to be heard. Audio quality is much better than picture quality, for example. It's much more important than picture quality. People will forgive a slightly grainy picture, for example, if they can hear every word nice and clear. So just basic technical stuff, and then as long as you're improving over time, then people will forgive you those early mistakes, because they'll see you getting better, and you'll grow your audience as you get better. And that audience that grows with you will know you're better than those early videos. So it won't matter so much.
Of course. And I think that makes a lot of sense, like again, in my personal life here, I should say, I use the Yoga with Adrian, massive sensational hit. I don't know if you know that, Martin, but, Yoga with Adrian has become like a roaring success. It's amazing. She set up probably 8 or 9 years ago. The concept was home yoga. But, what she's done is, I think she has about 9 million subscribers maybe on YouTube. She does like real life events, which is, around the world now. And it's very approachable. But what she started doing was, using, I guess, YouTube as an SEO tool. She creates like, yoga for back pain, yoga for tennis, yoga for sports injuries, yoga for whatever. And then started to build these 30-day courses as well. So I think she has about 5 of these 30-day courses online now. And it's great because as a human being, it's very sticky. If I start a 30-day course, I know it's probably only 25, 30 minutes a day. And it's not like a really intense Ashtanga flow where you're coming out sweating and whatever. But it's a really nice thing to do that, you've done that every day. Same like if you have got a specific injury, say tennis, your shoulder, that class will be for that. So I guess probably, that's been a big thing in terms of, building out something. But the reason I'm mentioning this is that her early videos were really not great. If she's listening right now, sorry, Adrian, but it's kind of true. I think you referenced this, in your own videos, and, some of it is, a voiceover, and it just looks fairly averagely produced on a home camera. Whereas now it's almost like Hollywood production, but it's still got that natural flow to it. So it's taken her 8 or 9 years to get to something which looks very professionally done, really. But I guess that kind of takes time. And maybe just one thing I just want to touch on with this, I just want to get your opinion. So it's on using YouTube for SEO, because they always say YouTube is, is almost like a search engine itself. For your videos, when you put them out there, I mean, I know you've got your newsletter, which you'll share your, links on. You obviously got your social. What's your thoughts on the algorithms and stuff on YouTube? Like, do you get much discoverability organically from YouTube? Do you put a lot of work into your descriptions, or is it literally being driven by your kind of assets? Like, I'm just interested in knowing if someone was going to put a video on YouTube, how they should do it for SEO.
You need to make sure that the videos you're publishing are actually things that people will want. And so if it's something that's really general, that you can be too general or you can be too niche. And so if you're really, really niche, then a tiny, virtually nobody will be interested in your video. And if it's really general, then everyone else has videos that will probably rank higher because there are more more popular people with that, with videos on that topic. So I find the videos that do best for me are guides. So guides that are actually, think how to do things, or are, reviews of something, for example, something very specific that there aren't many reviews of. So my most popular video, I think, as we record this, is one about newsletters and how to which newsletter software is best to create an editorial style newsletter, and I compare Substack and Review. And go through the positives and negatives of both. And that's organically, people search for Substack or Review on YouTube. And that's because there are other videos out there about it, but I don't think there are any other videos directly comparing the two. And so people are drawn to it through that. And over time, YouTube recognizes that and promotes it more in terms of where it ranks in terms of videos it might recommend to people, that kind of thing. Whereas if it's a video, me talking about something Twitter has done this week as a bit of analysis, then that might need more of a push from me on my other social networks to get people to view it. And that might get me a couple of subscribers, or 2 or 3 subscribers, and some likes and a couple of comments maybe, but it won't necessarily be a long-term hit. Its long tail will be very low, whereas the newsletter, or I did a review of Pitch, the PowerPoint rival, that is that's doing better because people search for that over time.
I guess, like you're saying, that evergreen content is probably going to be something which is useful down the line for that long tail. And like you said, also relevance. I guess it's probably a bit like, when I use all sorts of tools for SEO, if you will, for writing blog articles, if you will. But I guess typing into YouTube, seeing what people are actually searching for, and looking at some of those guides, maybe seeing if there's a few gaps in the market there in terms of niches you can create.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And final question I've got really on some of your tips before we enter our famous rapid fire round, which I'm sure you can't wait for. You've got a lot on your plate, but you obviously enjoy it. Like, you always got a smile on your face. You're always vibrant and active online. You've obviously got little kids as well. I'm interested, like, how do you kind of keep it all together on a weekly basis? Like, have you got any tips that you use for like a work-life balance, or does that not exist in terms of life? Is there anything you have in your routine that really help you?
I mean, it's easier, actually. It's easier in the less busy, in terms of being out and about, COVID-19 world, to balance, I find anyway. I mean, a lot of people would say the opposite, where you're at home and so you're working at home, and your family life's at home, and so you can't really manage both, and you find them blurring. But I find that it's easier for me to very strictly say, right, time to stop now, and then go and do family stuff, and then I might need to do a bit of work later on. But I, for some reason, find that because there's less travel involved, it's a lot easier to manage at that time. If it's more kind of normal times, as you might say, and I'm traveling around, that's where the actual problem comes, because that's where, there's an event I need to go to, or I've got a meeting and it's overrun and I'm not going to get home in time, or whatever. That's where the problem lies, I think. And so partly it's what I was mentioning earlier. It's around having the time slots I put into the day. I don't like actually filling an actual like Google Calendar or whatever with, at 9 o'clock I'm going to do this, at 10 o'clock I'm going to do this, because then your day looks horrible. It looks ugly and foreboding. But if you've just got a text list of, I'm going to do this at this time, and then you're getting through everything you need to get through, and that hopefully you can stop in good time to do whatever you need to do elsewhere in your life.
No, I think it's important to kind of make sure you've got that. And that sounds perfect that you've got that distinction, because I think sometimes being an entrepreneur, or at least working from home or the like, it can be tempting just to carry on working and think, do you know what I mean? I need to do this, or, we're in COVID, let's work all evening or whatever. From what it's worth, I've recently changed up my schedule. So as I tend to be working from say 12 noon till 10 p.m. That works well. I can have a little break around about 5:30, see the kids for dinner, put them to bed about, for an hour and a half. And then I do, a few more hours after that, which is great. But it gives me the morning now to get out for a bit of walk, like maybe a bit of exercise. And then it's just it's almost like twisting that day on its head, really, and saying, right, what are the things I always thought I would do later in the evening, but I couldn't be asked really after a busy day of work. It's like, can I do the exercise and, the meditation and like, get out of the house in the morning, and then in the evening, what am I missing out on? Watching TV for an hour or two or whatever. So it's kind of like working out well, but I think changing that up and working out what works for you is so important as well. Cool. So
Yeah, I found that having a sorry. No, I feel that having an hour and a half lunch, rather than a lunch break of an hour, seems to work better for me, because it kind of, in the olden days I'd have been traveling more, which would have eaten up time in my day. But having about an hour and a half lunch rather than an hour, when I can justify it, where I don't have too much work, works well for me and helps pace out my day a bit more. So taking time to do nothing is important as well.
Well, I'm hoping that hour and a half is like the old lunches of yore in the UK, where bankers would go for a 4-hour lunch, slap up dinner and everything like that as well. So, yeah, no, very nice. I must admit, yeah, you're right. You've got to break that time up really, and again, have that. So it sounds like you've got work-life balance down to a T, which is great. Okay, cool. So rapid fire round is here. So it doesn't have to be too rapid. It doesn't have to be too slow. So it's kind of up to you. Feel free to give a little bit of kind of source on this as well. So first off, favorite entrepreneurs and why?
Ooh, I like people who have a passion and really stick with it. People who they might get knocked back, or they might have an experience, but then they still push forward, whatever happens. So one person who springs to mind, just partly because I mentioned him, his company earlier, Pitch. So Christian Reber and the people who started Six Wunderkinder in Berlin. So they had Wunderlist about 10 years ago. They launched that. That got acquired by Microsoft, and they became part of Microsoft for a while. They went through the whole VC funded thing before that, and they were building this big platform that was going to be a big kind of future of work platform. And then what ended up happening was they went to Microsoft, and Wunderlist ended up getting shut down. They moved away from Microsoft before that and thought, well, what can we do next that's in a similar vein, and making productivity beautiful and rethought in a new way is basically what they do. That's what they did with the to-do list with Wunderlist, and then they did it with Pitch, which is like PowerPoint or Keynote, but a much kind of cooler version, and made for the 21st century, made for the 2020s kind of version.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, I think there's a lot of software out there as well that needs some kind of loving attention, really, to make it a bit more friendly or human, if you will, do as well. Design is here. Is one of those things people should be hopefully building things with great design and great UX in mind as well. This kind of moves on from this as well. So maybe most inspiring person, that could be somebody. It doesn't have to be in tech or startups. Who would you say is probably one of your most inspiring people out there?
Most inspiring person. It's really difficult. And I was worried that when you said, quick fire round, and I thought, don't pre-brief me on these. I'll just wing it and it'll be fine. If you say most inspiring person, the problem with most inspiring person is it immediately brings to mind people like Elon Musk or, people, Steve Jobs or something. But to me, they're cliches. And yeah, they can be quite inspiring. I think Elon Musk, people paid too much attention to the things he says. You should look at what he does. He does a lot of very good things, but if people listen to him too much, he's also a bit of an internet troll, and, talks a lot of rubbish as well. So focus on what he does rather than what he says. So honestly, I struggle to think of anyone who I think is, they're the most inspiring person, because I'm inspired by, I suppose, events and articles I read and things like that, as opposed to individual people. So in this case, I'm going to have to say I don't have an answer to that one.
That's completely fine. This is why I don't prep people for the rapid fire round, because I'd rather have a natural answer than you going, well, Jonny, I spent 3 hours thinking about this, and this is, it's Nelson Mandela again, or it's, whatever. It's got to be that natural.
Yeah.
If you're inspired by events or inspired by things that are happening from that, that's completely fine. And I fully agree. It's it's very kind of like subjective as well. What are maybe some of your favorite business books or even online business resources that you maybe would point, solo entrepreneurs towards, or people who run, say small startups, but are obviously kind of ambitious and want to scale that up over time?
I would say don't read too many business books. I'd say business books can be useful, but I think they can, if everyone reads the same business books, like for example, if everyone recommends a certain business book, I generally won't read it. There are exceptions. I read things like, I don't know, The Lean Startup, for example, because I felt as a tech journalist, I needed to read that book because it was informing the way at the time so many startups were being built. But generally, I try not to read too many of those kind of books because I think that, if everyone's reading the same books, you get groupthink. Take inspiration from elsewhere. So an interesting book, I think, for how the world works is a book about politics, actually. It's called Haven't You Heard by Marie Leconte. I think it only came out last year, but it's about political gossip and the way that UK politics is shaped by relationships and the way, who drinks at which bars, who's friends with who has an advantage by sharing a bit of gossip to that person for that reason based on, something they knew about that person 10 years ago or whatever. And once you see just how much that kind of low level under the surface interaction influences politics, you realize that actually that's the way the world works beyond politics as well. It's the way business works. A lot of the time, it's down to all those under the surface interactions, and so that, I suppose, has helped me think of the world of work in a slightly different way, and think of human interactions in a slightly different way. And I think rather than siphoning off business as this thing, and then it's part of this bigger world, but I need to understand business as a big lump of stuff. Actually, it's about the world, and if you think inside the business box too much, then that could be very limiting.
No, I think that makes perfect sense, to be honest, Mark. I like a contrarian in life for a start anyway. So if people do come in and name the same business book every week, then who knows what we're going to do with that. But I agree. I think it's true, a lot of work gets done at the bar at night, doesn't it? You even see at conferences and stuff. And I think kind of like you said, there's these kind of small kind of cliques, if you will, that form, and that's where things actually happen. And you've got to understand life, because understanding life is understanding human nature, customers, how to grease the wheels, how to do all sorts of things, almost get the PR stories or get the word out as well. So that is definitely going on our blog, obviously, as well as one of our book recommendations. I'll make sure that happens. So are there any favorite social media accounts, that you would recommend as well for entrepreneurs to follow? There's an awful lot of stuff online. I mean, okay, you follow all these things on Instagram and it's like top 10 tips for doing whatever, but is there any that genuinely stand out that make you think, wow, people should follow those for some great inspiration?
I find I'm going to be contrarian again. I find entrepreneurial inspiration often a bit of a cliche. I find that it can be people it's no better than those inspirational quotes people hang on their walls of dream big, be better, or whatever. And those are just those are just like a fad, and it's one step above hanging "keep calm and carry on" your wall. And so I think people can draw too much from kind of inspiration, and you get the same inspiring stories from everyone. So I'm just going to say, be interested in the world, be interested in far more beyond entrepreneurship, because you can Google something if you need to know it. But when it comes to inspiration and finding a guiding star in the world, find those guiding stars outside of the pigeonhole of business and entrepreneurship, and see the world more broadly, and don't be an MBA head.
Yeah, I mean, again, good advice. I actually name checked this in another podcast recently, but as you know, I'm a big fan of beer and BrewDog as well. And I remember years ago reading an interview with them, and BrewDog's was fairly big then. I mean, they had like 7 or 8 bars. Now I think they have 100. But I think kind of like they said they would never, ever dream of taking inspiration from the beer industry. They take inspiration from other industries, other people, fashion, retail, whatever, because actually they can learn an awful lot from that. They would never go and steal the Heineken playbook, but actually, I'm sure there's a few things they've borrowed of systems they've built, infrastructure. But actually, in terms of being able to do marketing campaigns or things which actually make them stand out, they can borrow an awful lot from the world out there. So I think just having this kind of general appreciation and knowledge of life is so important. This is a question that I've got here for you, which ties in maybe to some of the stuff we've just been talking about. So if time was of no significance to you at all, Martin, and you could spend your day doing one thing that would help, that you would enjoy, but also help grow your business, what would be that thing?
I would, if I could spend my day doing one thing, I would sit down and I would plot out, having said everything I've said, this sounds a bit odd, but I would actually spend the time to sit down and I would plan out all my ideal customers to really grow Big Revolution, rather than keep it as a, I suppose, boutique is one way you could say it, operation as it is at the moment, and really grow it big. And I would look at, do I have the guts to just focus on one thing? So, for example, if I really wanted to grow Big Revolution, I could just turn a whole chunk of what I do into PR, and I could frame it as a PR company. I don't want to do that because there are enough PR companies in the world, and I like doing the other stuff. I like the branding side of it. I like all that kind of things. And so I would look at what's the biggest business opportunity, and then I would spend my time focusing on how would I grow that, and then I would have the guts to just say, I don't care what it looks like, or that I'm entering a really busy market already. I'll make sure that I'm going to differentiate myself and really grow this business. And part of me wants to do that, and part of me thinks if I just took the time to go and do that, then that would be great. But at the same time, I think you've got to go where your soul is, and I think while part of me really wants to achieve that, part of me also I don't want business success at the expense of my soul and enjoying what I do and feeling fulfilled with what I do. So so while I'd quite like to do that, and it would grow my business, I don't know if I really will.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, this is something which we do at Subkit a lot, and talk about work-life balance a lot, because that's got to be something that's important. It's looking about what you can do to live a more fulfilling life. Like, how can you build a sustainable business, but also make sure that you're actually winning at life? What's the point in working 120 hours to earn 120 grand, say, a year, when actually maybe you could be working 50 or 60 hours to earn 50, 60 grand, and if that's enough to make you live the lifestyle you want to live, and, that you're getting fulfillment every day, that's great. Probably working 120 hours a week, I don't even know if that's possible. I'm maybe Jack Ma or someone doing that, but I think you would be massively burnt out, I think, very, very quickly, I think, on that level. So I think from that point of view, I think it's a good answer, really. I think there are lots of things we all know we could do, but I think it's a bit like YouTube videos. I love doing them. I love doing these podcasts, but probably if I did 5 podcasts a day for 2 weeks, it might be great for our content. We might be able to kind of, build up this SEO YouTube, but actually I probably would just be in a corner, just rocking back and forward, going, I can't speak to anybody ever again or something. So I guess it's having that balance. We're all programmed for variety in life. That's kind of what we want, isn't it? We all want something that's actually fulfilling, but, give us that variety on a daily basis. I'm interested. Again, I don't want to prep you on this, but I'm interested to know whether there's been any funny anecdotes that have kind of come about in your life of business. Is there anything which really stands out? Could be from a conference you've been, something that was just a humorous moment, or something where you've kind of ballsed up, if you don't mind me using that too.
Something where I've messed up. I'm trying to think now. I mean, it happens. Everyone has their humorous moments. I'm trying to think. Off the top of my head, I'm sure they exist. I'm sure they exist, but off the top of my head, it's very hard to think of one that would really hit the mark on this one. In fact, it's impossible to think of any whatsoever. So yeah, I certainly have. I certainly have messed up in humorous ways. But off the top of my head, not so much. Things that have happened at conference. I'll tell you one thing. I remember doing chairing a panel, and I was chairing this panel, and it was about a topic that I didn't really understand, which was fine because it was quite a deep tech thing, and it was fine because although I normally wouldn't chair a panel about something I didn't understand deeply myself, or at least couldn't research deeply myself, in this occasion it was just a favor. Could you just go and chair this panel for 20 minutes? The experts, on stage will know what they're doing. Yeah. And so I was sitting there and I was ready for them to come on, and they came on. And I thought, right, this is going to be easy because the audience will have questions. It's a very hardcore technical audience. They understand this topic very well. The panelists do. I asked the first question. Well, the first problem was 2 of the 4 panelists didn't turn up.
Right.
So we had 2 panelists. And it turned out that the 2 panelists who were there were the least talkative people I have ever been on stage with, ever. And so I asked the first question, and they answered it in about a sentence each.
Yeah.
And I tried to get more out of them, and it was like getting blood from a stone. I asked the second question. It was over in about 30 seconds tops. I asked the audience if they had any questions to liven it up a bit. Dead. Nobody. The audience was packed, but completely silent.
Yeah.
We wrapped up this probably half-hour slot in about 5 minutes. That is my ultimate fear in moderating panels, is that somehow we won't have enough to say, and it always works out fine, and it's great. I've never had that problem ever before or since. So if you're watching this and you want me to moderate a panel, please do. I'm good, honestly. But on this one occasion, it was that 1 in a million situation where the panelists didn't want to be there. The audience seemingly weren't actually into it at all, even though it was dedicated to a topic they were interested in, and it was completely rubbish. So yeah, I literally took the step of annoying the event organizers by saying, right, we're going to wrap up there. And so because literally there was nothing else to do. So that's probably the one occasion I can think of something that's an event has gone really badly. Yeah.
No, I think that's completely fine. I think that is a good anecdote, to be honest, Martin. I think, I think it's always interesting because, we all have to think on our feet very much. So, I was interviewing Monica, who runs Spice Club and Chic Shack, really high quality, Indian food service and social media presence. And she used to do the supper clubs at her house pre-COVID. And, they would always send out the address 24 hours in notice. And when we were chatting recently about this, she went, she was doing all the prep work the night before. She sent out the addresses that night, like, this is where you're going to come for the secret supper club. And the one couple turned up fully dressed up at their house the night early, just fully ready to kind of enjoy a really nice night of Indian food with full of people. She was just like, oh, it's tomorrow night, just, had to turn these people away. So it wasn't like an illegal rave, where they, you get texted the address right then. And you go. It was literally like, you've got 24 hours. It's a secret supper club, where, it's people. So yeah, there's all interesting stories I think people are going to have where, we've all had a slight setback, but you've got to think on your feet, and kind of do that. Couple more questions. So, if someone was thinking about taking the plunge and just creating their own business or starting out from scratch, what kind of advice would you give them?
I would say, and I know this sounds trite, but just do it. Like, literally, just don't worry about it, and stop thinking there's a definite way to do everything. Yes, there's a definite way to file your tax return or whatever, but as long as you've got a decent accountant, then that'll be fine. But everything else, aside from anything legal or financial, there's no way of doing it that is the way of doing it, and so find your own way of doing it, and just get on with it, because I think what scared me off doing it for too long was thinking that I'd get something wrong and there would be a wrong way of doing things.
Yeah.
And I think the only thing that I have struggled with, and I've got a lot better with in more recent times, but early on I struggled with talking about pricing and talking about money, and feeling like it was an imposition to ask people for money, even though I was doing work for them. That's where I've grown over time, and that was probably the thing where I just had to do it and get on with it, even though I had to learn that there was no obvious way of doing that and no defined way of doing that, and you just had to get on and sort it out yourself.
Yeah, I guess, got to pay the bills as well. but like you said, everybody's kind of on this journey. Like it's everybody is got to figure it out for themselves, which is so important. Like you said, I think there's a lot of this that ties into the conversation we've had today about, there's certain tools for doing this, or there's business advice over here, or books. But I guess you've got to take in what you can take in, and then get on with it really in your own vision, and pick up stuff and pick up the slack as and when you need to. If you need to work out how to do something, whether that's SEO, doing a YouTube channel, whatever, there's going to be some guides out there, but you've got to do that. And then also work on the technical side of the business as well, all the admin. Then while you're here, Martin, it would be really, upsetting to me, being a tech geek, not to actually ask you as well, and maybe put you on the spot as well for all of our listeners and viewers, about what you see to be the 2021 tech trends, or maybe even some of those trends that are going to be happening for a few years. I mean, we started off this call by saying COVID has disrupted things in a big way. I'm interested to know what your thoughts are about what these trends are going to be.
Yeah, I think that the whole remote work thing is going to continue, even as people start to go back to offices. I think it's just a fact of life that people like to do some work from home now. I think what will be interesting to see, which model of blending home and office working works best, because I think that companies will try different things. I think I saw recently that Google is planning some kind of work X% of time in the office, X% at home kind of approach. You're seeing Oracle has been saying they're going to be a lot more flexible about where people work. For example, you can work anywhere in the US if you're a US employee, for example, that kind of thing. But we'll see. I think over time, a lot of the problems that people have around, yes, but what if they change my pay because I move to a less upmarket area? That's not really fair, is it? Those kind of disputes and problems will shake themselves out. But what I think is most interesting is the kind of tech tools we'll see. So, for example, Slack has been very popular, Zoom has been very popular, but there are a million little things that they don't do, and holes they don't fill, and things they don't quite solve for people. So there will be loads of different services that will emerge. I was hearing, for example, that the Web Summit, when they held their most recent event, their Lisbon Web Summit, ostensibly, but obviously it was remote in 2020. They got online networking really right. So the idea of being kind of speed dating. So it's something that Hopin does as well, that we mentioned earlier. So where you're logged into an online event, but you can get chatting to somebody. Now, I've been scared off doing this so far, because do I really want to sit here for half an hour chatting to random people? Not really, because I don't know who they are, and I prefer the real life networking of you're standing next to somebody in a queue for some food or whatever, and you just get talking, and it's a chance encounter. But apparently, from the feedback I saw online, people really liked the way the Web Summit did it, and they got talking to some really interesting, valuable people, because their algorithm in the background matched them up with really interesting people. Right. So I think we'll see things like networking, interperson networking, solved. So it's those kinds of things that I'm looking forward to seeing.
Definitely. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think it's been quite painful, some of the stuff online we've done. It kind of makes you glad for the offline stuff that we were doing in real person before COVID. But I guess probably the counterbalance is maybe a happy medium, like you said, starting off with about the home office and working from home. And then also, maybe not having to go to so many real life events because there's some kind of thing solved, but then maybe looking forward to the other events that happen in real life a lot more, like maybe being a bit more picky and choosy about the things, obviously, that we want to commit our time to. Like you said earlier on, there's no point in just spending all of your time commuting to something when it really, the payoff could be that you could have done it at home. But actually, if there was something that you were really looking forward to, whether that's going to Slush or something or whatever, that might be something that's really in your calendar because you go, I can't miss out on that. So I'm just also interested to follow up question on this. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of people that are unemployed, unfortunately, coming out of COVID. You read recently, recession is happening. There would be some kind of rebound. There's a lot of pent-up consumer demand that's going to be out there if this vaccine does work. But do you think really the government is going to, I mean, like say world governments when I mention this, obviously we're both based in the UK. Do you think there will be much government support for entrepreneurs to go out there and do it themselves? Do you think there'll be mass, schemes, training schemes, that's aimed at entrepreneurs, or do you think they'll just revert to type and try and help industry again? I'm just interested to know whether you've heard much about support for entrepreneurs coming out.
It does. Well, it doesn't feel like it, does it? In the UK, there hasn't been that much for the smaller entrepreneurs. There's been some smaller people who work for themselves have had nothing. So, and I'm certainly not hearing anything out of the States that suggests that. Now, with a new administration, maybe that would change, but. I can't see that so much. It really depends because in the end, I think even though more people are probably working for themselves through necessity, to an extent, when there isn't as much employment around, I think a lot of people like the reassurance of knowing that there's going to be a paycheck every month and all of that, and the kind of sense of working for somebody. So while I think we'll see more entrepreneurs than we used to have, and I think there'll probably be a sizable chunk more because people realize that actually being more flexible and doing your own thing is quite appealing. Will there be more support? I've not seen anything that indicates there will be, which is a shame. But maybe over a longer term, that may change just because entrepreneurs get more of a voice because there are more of them.
I think you're right. I think it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Maybe not direct government support to start off with, but actually probably we're going to get to a point where out of necessity, people are going to have to create their own jobs or, to go right back to the start, it's called side hustles, side gigs, or even just doing something because a dream job or even a job just doesn't exist, whether that's locally or in their kind of, industry. So it's going to be very, very interesting these kind of times. It's going to be really interesting next few years. And again, like mass disruption is happening, mass changes, but, it's going to be very, very interesting. I think, it's almost like a, I guess, wartime situation, but without giant bombs falling out of the sky, which are, disrupting infrastructure. So yeah, very, very interesting. So Martin, I just want to say a very big thank you for obviously joining us today. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. Remind everybody where they can get in touch with you. So obviously you've got your social channels and website. Where can they find you to obviously touch base with you?
On social media, you find me on Twitter at Martin SFP. In fact, I'm Martin SFP everywhere. On whatever social network you're looking at, find me there. And then on the web, bigrevolution.net and martinbryant.net.
Right, brilliant. There we go. Amazing. And thanks very much as well for joining us today, Martin. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for joining the Go Solo show, and we'll catch up with you soon. Cheers. Take care.
Thanks a lot.